Coming up next, the award-winning Below the Line with George Peroulas, 2013 winner of the AVA Award for Excellence in TV Production Editing.
So, you made your TV show and now you're looking for a network to air it. Or what about that indie film you made that's now sitting on the shelf collecting dust as you wait for the phone to ring? Today, you'll find out how you should pitch your creation and get your project seen by the masses. It all starts now on Below the Line.
It's Below the Line with George Peroulas. On tonight's show,
Welcome to Below the Line. I'm George Peroulas. Production companies continually create show concepts or have stacks of screenplays ready to be filmed. My guest today knows how to get the green light, and he's here to explain how the process really works. From Susie Films, please welcome Scott Galloway. Hi Scott, how are you?
I'm well, thanks George. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. Now, how did you first get into the TV business?
Well, when I was in college, I wrote some plays, and they did fairly well. And so there was a production company. I went to school in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee, and there was a production company in Knoxville that I had heard about. And this was back in like 1990. So a friend of mine took some of my sample writings and submitted them to a friend of his. They were in a rock band. I'm not kidding. And the guy who did the audio for the rock band submitted it to this vice president of a company, who read it and thought that my writings were pretty good, and so they took a chance on me. And the first thing I did was I did some spec work for a new network that everybody now knows called Comedy Central. And the piece that we did, we didn't get it, but they liked what I wrote, and then I had an opportunity to work for them on a travel show. And that's really how I got started.
So you're writing for the Travel Channel, and of course over the years you've also produced and directed. And one of the first projects, one of the main projects you did was America's Castles. What was that?
America's Castles was essentially a look at the great homes in American history that were really affiliated with families. So the way that came to be, we really wanted to work with A&E, and when I say we, I worked for a company called Cinetel Productions. And we pitched them an idea on family dynasties. It's like the Astors, the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, and they liked it, but they thought it was too similar to their other series Biography, which was really popular at that time. So they asked us, why don't you come up with a variation on this that might be different but could be a companion to the Biography series? So we decided to try and figure out a way to show some of these big homes across the country. When I say big homes, I mean, the Biltmore in Asheville, San Simeon, which is William Randolph Hearst Castle. And we used those homes as kind of a way to tell the stories of the homeowners. But while we were telling their stories, we were also talking about the history, the architecture, the design, the landscaping, and it really became a popular series. It started with two-hour specials on A&E, and then we ended up doing 5 seasons. We ended up doing over 65 episodes. So that was a big series. It was a lot of fun to do. It was neat to get a chance to travel and meet so many different people, and as a young man, I got an opportunity to learn a lot about architecture and design, a lot of things that I didn't know. So it was kind of learning in addition to working.
And that was in the early years of cable television. Now there's so many channels. Walk me through the process back then of getting a show like this on the air, and I'm sure it's different now, but back then, how does it work, and does the production company own it, or A&E, or is it a co-partnership, or how does that work?
Well, you're right. This was back in the early days. I'm talking about when we did the first 2-hour special, it was 1993. Then we did the second 2-hour special in 94, and then at the end of 94, we went into a series. So back then, there weren't nearly as, I want to say there were maybe 20 networks. That's it. The Nielsen ratings, we tried to get a 3.0. And in today's world, if you get like a 0.6, you're hot. So we were trying to consistently get 3.0s. Huge viewership. As far as the deal went, I went into the meeting, I sat in the meeting, but honestly I was a throw pillow kind of in the corner. The executive producers, Ross Bagwell and Stephen Land, they did the deal, and they did it in a way that they were able to get some of the residuals, which back then, again, in the early 90s, VHS tapes were really popular, so they got a cut of the VHS tapes. There was calendars, there were coffee mugs. There was a lot of merchandise associated with the series as well that they got a cut on. So today, the way it works is you sell a show, and the network gets not only the show, they get everything. They get the raw footage. There's no residual after the fact. So it's a different place.
And in addition, over the years, you've also worked with ABC and Food Network and PBS, A&E, GAC Network, and of course many film festivals with those that you've done as well, and we'll get to that in a minute. So what's it like being a player on this international field?
Well, it's great. I think the thing that I like the most about doing television shows is you get a chance to tell a story, but you also get a chance to work with people who are really good at what they do. If you work with a really talented cinematographer, just seeing the way they frame shots or the lensing selections that they make, or a really talented gaffer who can set the light on a key light or a fill light, audio, music, mix. There's nothing I enjoy doing more than working with a composer here in Charlotte, Fred Story. After we've finished with a television show or made a film, watching him literally create music out of the air that enhances the emotion of a scene is just incredible. So that's what I like doing more than anything. It's the working with a really creative group of people and collectively creating something that you're really proud of. As far as the networks go, ABC is a great network to work with. They're national. They're a broadcast network, to use an old term, so they've got a lot of money toward production, and they've been great. PBS is great in that there's a real they're not involved in the content as much, so you're kind of the final arbiter of what makes it onto the program, which is exciting. So each network's different. Food Network, I love working for the Food Network. The thing I'd say about the Food Network is when you do a Food Network shoot and people know you're working with a Food Network, they go out of your way to make sure that you're having a great time. So by way of example, we did a shoot in Memphis in May several years back, and they gave us a giant golf cart, and so I had enough room for my crew and all the equipment, and this golf cart was going on, but it said Food Network on top of it, and I mean everybody at this international barbecue competition saw the Food Network, and they all kept coming up and giving us free food because they wanted us as the Food Network to say, oh, your food's great. So that was fun.
And of course, being in the stretch limo golf cart was pretty interesting
yes.
too, which is probably cool in itself.
It was cool. It was great.
Now, how has the cable TV business and the network business changed over the past couple of decades in regards to trying to get a show on the air?
One of the ways that the cable network environment has changed is that there's so many more networks out there. I mean, again, 20 years ago there were 15, 20 networks. Now there's 500, which is good and bad. One of the reasons that it's good is it gives you the opportunity to try and pitch different networks, and if you're a production company, you've got a lot more options. It's bad in that the number of viewers have not increased that much. So viewership across the board has dropped. When viewership drops, ad dollars drop. When ad dollars drop, production fees drop. So you've got to figure out ways to become more streamlined. That's one challenge. The other challenge is the internationalization of the marketplace. And what I mean by that is it's very difficult at that level when you're pitching big television networks to compete as an American, because the BBC and the CBC and the Australian channels, they all have government subsidies and tax breaks, and networks know that. So if you watch if you watch the Discovery Channel network, just watch how many programs are produced by the BBC or the CBC out of Canada. It's very hard to compete against some of the built-in incentives that they have.
Very good. Keep watching more with Scott Galloway and how to get your film distributed next on Below the Line. You're watching Below the Line. With us is Scott Galloway from Susie Films. Well, I've worked on many projects, and their distribution plan is to figure it out after they're done. So they do their show or their film, and then just try to knock on networks' doors to try to get the show on the air and say, oh, our show is catered towards Lifetime or TBS or PBS or some other channel. But that's not how it works, because these companies have their own development team and their own people to create these shows, so they're not waiting for someone to show up with a show. And independent, filmmakers and TV show producers are like, oh, once the executives meet me, they're going to fall in love with my show and make it. But that's not how it works.
I've never heard of that working, to be honest with you. usually the way it works is this: you pitch a network, and you try and get to the decision makers. I mean, a lot of times you can meet somebody who works at, I'm making this up, National Geographic Channel, but they might be a showrunner on an inside show. So when you pitch them, it's not the person that you want to talk to. You want to talk to somebody who's vice president of development. And when you get to those people, if you can get the meetings with them, which is difficult because a lot of times they're like, well, what have you done previously? And it's hard to get previous work if you haven't had an opportunity. So I recognize that that's a challenge, but if you can get to the right people when you meet with them, the first thing you need to do is you need to meet with them and tell them who you are, and you have to really sell yourself. We're a production company, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we need to work with you first. Secondly, find out what they want, and then go back and give it to them, pitch it to them. And make sure that you're within, like I like to say, in the arena. You want to make sure that it's, you've had success in this field, so here's a show that follows up on that. See how that goes. But the biggest thing that really gets shows sold now, and the thing that I would encourage people is a little bit what you just alluded to, but not fully. Network executives get pitched unsolicited shows, 100 to 200 ideas a week. They have a little development team, as you mentioned, internally, who then weeds through 100 to 200 shows unsolicited a week and gets it down to 5 or 10. So when they meet weekly on Tuesday at 10 a.m., they'll say, here are the 10 shows. That's it, you've got to go through that. So there's a lot of volume there, but if you can make it to those 10, and this is the biggest thing that I would encourage people to do a little sizzle reel. Like, make a little piece, shoot whatever it is, but don't make it more than 2 minutes long. It minimizes your investment, but it gives them a sample of what it is. So I'll tell you what the lady told me at Discovery just 2 weeks ago. She said, and this is a great example, there's a show right now on A&E called Duck Dynasty. Okay, can you imagine pitching Duck Dynasty without a sizzle reel? I want to do a show in Monroe, Louisiana about guys who do duck calls. There's no way you could sell that. No one could sell that. But if you say that and then you show them the sizzle reel, you got a shot. So a lot of times they want to see that because then it also speaks to your ability. Look at our cameraman, look how we shot, look how our editor cuts, look at who might be talent. It helps them with the concerns of, wait, who is this production company in the Carolinas that I'm not familiar with? Oh, well, they did this sizzle reel. If they can take that 2 minutes and make it 21, 22 minutes, that's a great show.
So with more channels, less people watching those channels, and now you have the internet and other distractions, right. It's really tough to get the viewer. What does it take these days to be successful?
I think you have to stay diversified. I mean, we make independent films. We love making independent films. That's a difficult business model. We do television shows because we understand it, and that's what our experience is in. But the other thing that we've started to do, which speaks to how you keep viewers, is we're starting to do more and more of these short form pieces that are called branded entertainment. And the way they work is, you're right, the internet is a big challenge for television. But the other big challenge for television, and perhaps the biggest challenge, is TiVo and DVR. So people type a show, and then they come to it and they speed through the commercials. So networks know that, and a lot of times what they're trying to do is create content that looks like it's still programming. And they put it right up at the end, so when you go to commercial break, this content comes up and it's branded, meaning it's a, I don't know, Coca-Cola, and then you run it, and then it's sponsored on the backside, but it's a minute in length. And once you get a viewer into the commercial spot itself, then they usually stay and watch it through. So that's one of the big challenges, is that. But I think, with anything, you got to have great characters, and you've got to figure out a way to kind of break above the noise. Again, I'll cite Duck Dynasty. I think that what they do with that show that's interesting is it's a crazy family to a certain extent. You can't really fully identify with them, but at the same time you can. You got a father who doesn't want his daughter to dress too revealing, or you've got a guy who's got financial issues, or you've got the crazy uncle, and how does that all work? So I think people can identify with it to an extent, but the characters really set it above and beyond, and you have to find great characters.
And with the internet, I guess it has hurt and helped television. How does it help it, I guess, besides banner ads and having a website? Well,
one of the things now that we do when we deliver television programs, and again, a reason that the networks want them, HGTV, you deliver a show, but you also deliver all the footage, then they can use the footage for their sites. So it's almost like you can use it to promote programming, but you can also use it as, in addition to, or the Do-It-Yourself Network is a good example of that. They have great programming, but they only have 21, 22 minutes to do a project. So if you need to know more information, go to the website, and they'll explain in more detail what you've just seen. And so that's a great use of multimedia.
Very good. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. Scott Galloway with Susie Films is here today. So with all these shows out there, how can the executives predict what's going to be a hit in a year or two? Is it a gamble?
I think it's, yeah, I think it's a gamble to an extent. I think it's an educated guess. I think they follow trends, and then they kind of play off of them a little bit. And what I find interesting is when you see something that works, how do networks spin it, not only for the success of what they've already seen, but for their viewers. So by way of example, Antiques Roadshow has done a gangbuster business for PBS. A&E saw that, and they kind of put a spin on it, this whole notion of what do I have or what's out there. And so Storage Wars, in a real sense, to me, is kind of an homage or kind of a tip of the hat to the success that Antiques Roadshow had, in that you're standing there and it's almost like a treasure chest in Southern California, and how much are you going to bid on, and then you look through and what is this, and the items that I find most interesting are the ones that they ultimately have and get appraised. And to me, it really reminds me of that show. So that was an example of a really smart executive at A&E, saw the success of that show, put a little spin on it, and went with it. So I think they do that a lot. But again, they fail. I mean, television network executives fail, movie studio executives fail. It's hard to know what'll work.
Next time on Below the Line, part 2 of my interview continues with Scott Galloway. Here is a sneak peek of our next show.
Find out ways to come up with ideas that play to who you are and where you are. Then find a network that it's well suited for. That's the best way, I think, to get a show sold.
What is a pitch? How long should it be? And what should be included?
The biggest thing that you need to do is you need to have just a few ideas. All of the questions that they're going to ask you, you need to have an answer for, because that's the way the discussion goes. But the other thing that you want to try and figure out a way to do is try and get your film into film festivals, especially if you're not tied into a studio or a distributor initially. Agents can help a lot, and they're really skilled at that, but you want to make sure you get the right agent, and you also want to make sure that if you can't get representation, that you get your film out there either through film festivals or to production companies who make films similar to the film you've created.
And when you're pitching these ideas and you think you've got that original creative idea, how can you protect yourself from them not taking your idea and doing it themselves in a year?
I can answer that question.
That's all coming up next time on Below the Line. Part 2 of my interview with Scott Galloway continues next time on Below the Line. If you have any questions, comments, or show ideas, email us at belowtheline21@gmail.com and join our fan page on Facebook. We'll see you next time.
For more information, comments, or questions about the show, email us at belowtheline21@gmail.com.